In this demo, we're going to look at CI/CD pipeline automation. We're going to talk about the task that the developer needs to do, and then we're going to take a quick look at the benefits you get by using Aembit, and then we'll go into the demo itself. All right, so I'm a developer, and the task that I've been giving is to automate the CI/CD pipeline. In this case, my pipeline is in 3 places, or the software I'm going to be using is actually in 3 places. And my task is to create a pipeline in GitLab. Okay, GitLab is going to run code that's stored in GitHub. And once it's run the code and created the image, it's going to push the image to Docker Hub. So I'm going to have to be able to access GitHub and Docker Hub from my pipeline in GitLab. I have limited access to production credentials. In this case, I have really no access to the production credentials. So I'm going to have to get those credentials from somewhere. We'll see how that's done. I do have full access to the development environment and credentials there, so I can ensure that my automation works properly before switching over from a development and test environment to the production environment. So why Aembit? First, we want to be able to verify the identity of the workloads. In this case, GitLab is one of the workloads. It's going to be my server workload. That's where all the code is going to run. But we also want to ensure that we know about the server workloads, and that's the GitHub and Docker Hub. And we want to be able to differentiate between production, development, QA, other environments. We don't want to treat them all the same. Second, I want to be able to enforce conditional access. Most of these do not have any type of conditional access, but we want to be able to enforce a few different things. In this case, we want to enforce when this job is actually running, where the source of this job is, and so on. I want to be able to hide the production credentials from the devs, and I want to keep it out of the code. As I said, the code is in GitHub. There's code also in GitLab. I want to make sure that there are no statically defined passwords or secrets. I want to make sure that they're not stored anywhere statically, and I want to make sure that they're not in the code itself. I want to move away from any long-lived secrets and create secrets on the fly. I also want to make sure that I log everything centrally so I can go see what's happening in GitLab, but as an organization, we want to make sure that we see what's happening to our pipelines, regardless of where they live. It could be a GitLab pipeline today. We can move that to GitHub Actions tomorrow, but I want to make sure I log everything centrally. And I want to be able to do all of this easily for the organization, the folks configuring Aembit, and also easy for the developer. The developer really doesn't have to do too much to make all of this happen. And now let's look at it in the demo. All right, so first we're going to look at GitLab, and then we'll go to GitHub and then Docker Hub as this thing runs. And then we'll take a look at how we do everything in Aembit. Here is my project. It's just called Aembit Demo. And here there's a couple things to point out. One, this Aembit file, this is the Aembit agent. The Aembit agent is something you just can download quickly and then upload it to your project. We're going to be making a call using some code in Aembit agent to fetch credentials. Here is my actual pipeline. There's only 2 variables you have to set. You have to set the Aembit client ID and the Aembit identity provider. And then when we run the code, so the code is basically going to grab an image. We're going to fetch code from GitHub, and we're going to run the code, and then we're going to push out a virtual machine to Docker Hub. So in my test, you can see this is the actual code. This is the only code you need to run to get the credentials. You have to, in this case, it's going to be GitLab OIDC token that we share. We're trying to pull the workload for GitHub. And then further down, I also pull the Docker, the same thing for Docker. We take those credentials and we use them in our calls. So in this case, the username is something that's static. The password, I call it password here in the code, but it's a token that gets shared. And then we inject that for the GitHub connectivity and the Docker Hub connectivity as well. So I'm going to go ahead and run this pipeline. This usually takes a few seconds, so I'll just fast forward the video. Okay, it's about 1.5 minutes later, and as you can see, this is run successfully. Let's take a quick look at GitHub. In GitHub, the thing we called was this hello go. Very, very simple, just printing hello world. Again, the actual content doesn't matter. So we first call that. And then if we go to Docker Hub, I'm going to refresh this. You can see that we pulled the latest container repository a minute ago, did whatever we needed to do, and pushed it out. So very simple example of a CI/CD pipeline starting in GitLab and then go fetching code from GitHub and then pushing out the result to Docker Hub. Now let's go into the Aembit console and see how this was done. Okay, the first thing we need to do is under credential provider is we stored Docker Hub access token and the GitHub access token. And again, it says password, but these aren't my username and password. These are service tokens that are configured for both Docker Hub and GitHub. I've also created a trust provider, and the trust provider is using my project path. In this case, it's Aembit-Asher/Aembit demo. This is my project path, meaning only this project is the one that I can actually run from, right? So it is aware of which project. So if you do have multiple projects, you want to be sure that you're only trusting, verifying, and authenticating against a very specific one. And these match rules, we can have multiple match rules. In this case, I just used project path. And if I now go look at policy, I have policies for my CI/CD pipeline. I have one saying the connection is going to be from GitLab to the GitHub, and it's going to use the access token. And then I've created another one from GitLab to Docker Hub. So I can create multiple policies and make sure that the interaction is happening between my GitLab pipeline to any of my server workloads. And now if I go into my reporting, it tracks all the connections. So I can see here that it's attested and authenticated when I've actually run some of this stuff. Okay, here you can see we are using the Aembit Edge SDK. That's where the attempt is coming from, which is exactly what I expected. And there was a trust provider attestation, meaning it knows exactly where the connection is coming from. It trusts it. It gives it the data that it needs. That data is injected in the GitLab pipeline and sent off. Okay, and you can also see that there are 3 calls being made because I did make 3 different calls. One was during the test. So the first one that gets made is here to get credentials during my test. And then I have another one that happens for GitHub and one that happens for Docker. So those are the 3 that are actually being logged here. To learn more, please visit Aembit.io. Thank you.